Okay, let's dive right into something really unsettling today.
Yeah.
Imagine finding a body, not buried, the usual way, but entombed in concrete, in a construction trench.
Wow. That's an incredibly unusual, almost theatrical, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the twist that really gets this whole thing started isn't just the method, it's what they found with the body.
Mhm.
A note.
A note. Yep.
And this note, it's not just saying, hey, you caught the wrong guy for some big cold case.
Yeah.
It's personal, a direct challenge to a specific police detective.
Whoa.
And this detective, he just happens to be right in the middle of, like, the absolute hot seat in a huge civil trial.
Okay, that's a lot happening at once.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a pile of source material here, notes, articles, court records, police reports, and we're going to try and unpack a case that, well, it gets complicated fast.
It sounds like it. You've got this civil trial against a detective for a shooting, right? And then there's this old serial killer case, the Dollmaker.
That's the one. And now this new, frankly bizarre crime pops up that seems connected. It throws everything into, well, chaos.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to guide you through this tangle.
Exactly. We want to connect what's happening in that intense courtroom drama with the gritty stuff happening on the street with the investigation.
See how these old cases crash into new discoveries?
Yeah, and maybe uncover some surprising truths hidden in all the details. We want you to see how different people looking at the same facts can come up with totally different stories.
And how these intense drives for knowledge, maybe, or attention, or something much darker can push people.
In really unexpected ways.
Okay, so where do we start? The construction site.
Let's start right there. The grim discovery.
The concrete blonde, as she got called,
Right,
in that trend.
That method. Just sealing a body in concrete. It's extreme.
It really is. Takes incredible effort, time-consuming, difficult. The sources describe the body itself as dark, leathery, stretched taut over the bones.
Suggesting she'd been there a while.
Yeah, though the concrete probably slowed things down, decomposition-wise, still a really shocking scene for the first officers there.
And this being LA, the media show up almost immediately.
Yep. Apparently a leak from the coroner's dispatch frequency, every newsroom listens to that, so boom, they're on the scene fast, which becomes relevant later.
Right. And with the body, they find the note. This is the pivot point, isn't it? From just a strange body dump to something else.
Absolutely. The note was a direct challenge. It said flat out, you got the wrong guy. Talking about the original Dollmaker case.
Claiming the Dollmaker is still out there.
Still out there, and chillingly, buddy count continues. And it specifically calls out the detective, Bosch, challenging how he handled the original case, claiming they'd prove it with a, get this, a treasure map.
A treasure map, seriously. Wow, and the style of the note. Did it match the original Dollmaker letters?
Well, there was a similarity, but here's the thing. Details about the original letters, the tome, specific phrases, they'd been published over the years.
Including recently.
Yeah, in a book by an LA Times reporter, a guy named Bremer, who covered the original case like crazy.
Yeah.
So it's possible someone could copy the style using what was already out there, to make it look legit.
Okay, so the police find this body, this really weird note. What's the immediate next step?
Priority one is always ID the victim, figure out the time of death. That's your starting point.
And the note.
No.
They must have known that was dynamite, especially with the trial.
Oh, yeah. Lieutenant Pounds, the watch commander on scene, he got it immediately. Knew this could explode, given the trial. Tried hard to keep the note under wraps, away from the media.
Must have been tough with them already swarming the place.
You bet. But there's also this big question hanging there for the cops. Why? Why go to all that trouble to encase the body perfectly, then leave a note practically screaming, look over here?
What was Bosch's theory on that?
He figured it was about attention. Plain and simple.
The spotlight.
Exactly. The original Dollmaker got national coverage. The civil trial was a media circus. Some people just crave that, even for, horrible reasons.
That actually makes a grain kind of sense. And it leads us right back to the shadow of that original case. The Dollmaker.
Yeah, the original case. 11 women murdered. The sources describe them as coming from the city's underside. Sex workers, dancers, escorts, people on the margins.
And the signature. The makeup.
Right. Using makeup on the victims after they were dead. That's where the Dollmaker name came from.
And the guy they ID'd? Norman Church.
Oh,
He was identified after he died, right?
correct. Police tracked him down from a tip. There was a confrontation. Bosch shot him. The evidence linking Church to the murders came after that confrontation.
Specifically the makeup.
Yeah, makeup found in his apartment bathroom, which they connected to 9 of the 11 victims. The original task force, long gone by now, had guys like Lloyd and Mora on it. They even worked with profilers, like a Dr. Locke from USC.
And the reason this whole cold case is suddenly back in the spotlight even before the new body shows up is this civil trial.
Precisely. Norman Church's widow, Deborah Church, is suing Detective Bosch and the city. Wrongful death.
It's happening downtown federal court.
Yeah, the U.S. District Courthouse. The sources mention it feels a bit less formal than the county one across the street. Maybe gives an impression of quicker justice, I don't know. You've got Honey Chandler for the widow, Belk defending Bosch in the city, and Judge Keyes presiding.
And Chandler, the plaintiff's lawyer, she comes out swinging.
Oh, absolutely. No punches pulled. Paints Bosch as a rogue cop, says he acted as judge, jury, executioner.
And she attacks the evidence.
Aggressively. Questions the makeup found in Church's place, the timing of it all, basically suggesting it was maybe planted or at least super convenient to justify the shooting and save Bosch from prosecution.
And she makes it deeply personal, too.
Yeah, that was something. She brings up Bosch's own mother, her unsolved murder from decades ago. Found in a Hollywood alley, killer never caught. She had a record for loitering.
How does she connect that?
Chandler suggests that personal trauma maybe influenced Bosch, created a bias against people like the Dollmaker's victims, affected his judgment when he confronted Church. It's a powerful, maybe inflammatory angle.
And the defense. Belk strategy.
Seems to be less about denying everything and more about justifying the action legally. Arguing Bosch's actions were justified based on the perceived danger Church posed right then, even if there wasn't actually a gun under the pillow, for example.
It's a narrower defense.
Definitely. And the trial testimony itself. It brings out some interesting details from the original case files.
Like what?
Well, Lloyd, from the old task force, confirms Church was only ID'd after Bosch found the makeup. There's also testimony questioning Bosch's version of the shooting. Did he really shout, "Police"? Did Church really lunge for the pillow?
The witness who was with Bosch.
Georgia Stern, yeah.
Huh?
She testified she didn't hear him shout police. And then there's Amato, the ME coordinator. He gives these clinical details like lubrication was only found in 5 of the 11 victims and hairs from multiple men found on each body. Little details that paint a picture.
Okay, so that's the courtroom drama, the history bubbling up again. Now, back to the present day. The concrete blonde. Identifying her is the top job.
Right. And it's tricky. They actually have to make a death mask from the impression left in the concrete.
Seriously.
Yeah. An anthropologist paints it. One source note says initially it looked kind of like a cake, which is just a weirdly grim detail. But eventually it looked recognizable, good enough for TV anyway.
And they put it on TV to get an ID.
That's the plan. Show the face on the news, give out phone numbers, hope someone recognizes her.
Did it work?
Calls started coming in, yeah. Several people thought they knew her from the adult film world.
Porn industry.
Uh-huh. One caller was pretty specific, Maggie something, Latin, from adult videos, even described certain skills. Others just said porn starlet, stripper. There was even one sad call. A guy thought it was his missing wife, but the time of death didn't match.
So this leads Bosch to an unusual investigative step for homicide.
Totally. He heads out to the valley, goes to an adult video store. Based on those calls, he starts watching videos.
Trying to find a face that matches the mask.
And he does. Gets an ID from the credits. Magna cum loudly.
Magna cum loudly. Not exactly subtle.
No kidding. And this ID, it brings a key player from the past back into the loop. Detective Ray Mora, admin vice.
Mora. Wait, he was on the original Dollmaker task force, wasn't he?
He was. And, crucially, working vice, he knows that whole adult film scene inside out. Knows how transient it is, the women dropping in and out, often from tough backgrounds, maybe looking for a, quote, baddie figure.
And he remembers something specific.
Yes. He remembers a missing woman from that scene, a porno chick named Gallery. And a tip Gallery gave the task force maybe 4 years back.
What was the tip?
About some guy named Tom. Said he was writing a book, getting close to the girls in the industry. Back then, it didn't seem to fit the Dollmaker profile they had. But now, with a new victim from that exact world, suddenly sounds very significant.
And this connection, Magna cum loudly, Gallery, it starts to build into this follower theory, right?
Exactly. The investigators start looking closer. They connect Magna cum loudly and maybe Gallery to 2 specific victims from the original Dollmaker list, victims 7 and 11.
Why those 2? What was different about them?
Remember Amato's testimony? from the trial. He mentioned victims 7 and 11 had extreme damage, vaginal tears, different from the others, suggested maybe rougher trade.
Okay.
And then, this is wild, during the civil trial itself, more testimony comes out. A witness named Weitzerich. He has a videotape from a bachelor party.
And
It proves Norman Church had an alibi for the date victim 11 was killed. He couldn't have done it.
wait, Church, the identified dollmaker, couldn't have killed victim 11.
The timeline just doesn't work. The tape proves it, which means someone else killed victim 11.
And if victim 11 had that same extreme damage as victim 7.
It suggests the same person probably killed victim 7 too, someone else.
Okay, hang on. So the theory becomes, this other person, this follower, killed victim 7 and 11 before Church died, and then killed the concrete blonde magna cum loudly after Church died.
You got it. That's the follower theory taking shape. And they noticed something else, unlike Church, who didn't seem to care about hair color. This follower seems to prefer blondes.
Okay, but here's the huge question, right? If this follower killed victims 7 and 11 before Church was even caught, how did they know the dollmaker's secrets?
Bingo. That's the absolute core problem.
Like the program, the methods. The task force deliberately kept that stuff secret, didn't they? To weed out fake confessions.
Exactly. Those details were super tightly controlled before Church was ID'd. Now, Bremer's book, the reporter's book, that came out later, that might explain how the killer knew the methods for the concrete blonde victim.
But not for victims 7 and 11. They were killed before the book, before Church died.
Precisely. It doesn't explain how the killer knew those non-public details years earlier. It strongly suggests the follower had inside access. Access to confidential task force information, maybe someone on the task force or close to it.
Which brings Dr. Locke, the profiler, back into this.
Yeah, Dr. Locke, expert on sexual sadists. He talks about how they often live these double lives, right? Seemingly normal, cites Bundy BTK, says they often get caught making small mistakes.
He helped with the original profile.
He did. And when they tell him about this follower theory, this new pattern emerging, he gets kind of excited. In a, morbid academic way.
Sees it as a research opportunity.
Pretty much. Talking about getting a grant, studying a killer from the beginning, even jokes about getting out of this fucking dungeon of his university office.
So the police start hunting the follower, focusing on who had that inside access.
Assistant Chief Irving calls a meeting. Bosch, Edgar, Sheehan, Opelt from RHD. They go over the list of people who knew the task force details, and suspicion starts to land on one name, Ray Mora.
Mora. The vice detective, the one who remembered Gallery.
Yeah. Think about it. He was on the original task force. He knew the confidential details. He knew the adult film scene where the new victims came from. And his wife is blonde. Fits the apparent target preference.
So Irving greenlights surveillance on Mora.
Sets it up. Sheehan and Opelt start. Then other teams rotate in. Overtime is authorized. Bosch, though, the sources say he's hesitant. Doesn't feel right. Potentially ruining a fellow cop's career if they're wrong. He actually says something to Irving about it.
In Irving's response.
Irving throws Chandler's word back at him. Cowboying. Basically tells him to stick to procedure, don't go off half-cocked. A clear warning.
But Bosch being Bosch, he doesn't quite stick to procedure.
Nope, not entirely. Mora goes out one night, says he's going cruising, maybe movies. While he's out, Bosch goes to Mora's house.
Man.
And he breaks in, unauthorized. Huge risk.
Does he know he's being watched?
He doesn't realize the surveillance team is actively listening on their dedicated radio channel, Simplex 5. But the source notes say Bosch felt like he was being watched, which, well, was.
What does he find inside Mora's house?
A stash, porn magazines, tapes, a long black wig, women's lingerie, like sheer stuff, red stiletto heels, basically trophies.
And then the surveillance team catches him in there.
Yeah. Rollenberger, Sheehan, Opelt, Edgar. They'd been listening to Bosch moving around inside on the radio. They confront him in the house. Bosch finds Mora upstairs, cuffs him.
Must have been incredibly tense. An illegal search.
Oh, absolutely explosive. Rollenberger, the supervising officer, wants to call Irving immediately, report Bosch for the illegal entry.
But Bosch stops him.
Thinks fast. Points out they were all listening on Simplex 5 the whole time. The recordings will prove the surveillance team knew he was inside illegally and didn't stop him, didn't report it.
So they're implicated too. Their hands are tied.
Pretty much. They're all party to an illegal search now. It compromises the whole surveillance operation and potentially the evidence found.
And Mora, handcuffed upstairs, sees this chaos and sees an opportunity.
He sure does. He offers a deal right there. Says he has insurance. He knows who the killer really is.
His insurance is the killer's name.
Yeah. He'll trade the name if they agree not to charge him for whatever crimes the stuff in his house points to. The sources imply it's likely related to unlawful sex with a minor based on the videos and magazines.
A desperate move. And the name he gives them. The shocking reveal.
He claims the killer is Dr. Locke, the shrink, the profiler.
Locke.
Moore says Locke used his book research as a cover to get close to the girls in the porn industry, and he was the killer. The follower, maybe even the original Dollmaker. Moore even says he got an adult film producer to ID Locke for him.
With Bosch's reaction.
Stunned, completely jolted, but then he sees how it could fit. Locke, the expert profiler. He had access to all the task force info. He had that intense intellectual interest. It's shocking, but it seems plausible.
So now the hunt shifts entirely. Find Locke. But just as they're doing that, another bombshell drops. Something that turns the whole case upside down again.
It's maybe the biggest twist in the whole narrative. The concrete blonde, she's finally identified.
Not Magna Cum Loudly.
No, that was an alias. The concrete blonde is identified as Honey Chandler.
Chandler, the lawyer, the one suing Bosch.
The very same one. She didn't show up for court one day. That raised alarms. And the ME's estimated time of death, days earlier, at least 48 hours before her body was even found in that concrete, and way before the note was discovered there.
Wait. Honey Chandler, dead for days.
And
the note.
The note was found at the scene where they discovered her body, yes. But she'd been dead long before that discovery, which means the killer placed the note there later, maybe even after she was encased.
Planted evidence.
Looks like it. And the fact that the victim is Chandler, Bosch's legal opponent, it changes absolutely everything.
And this new timeline, Chandler being the victim, it helps clear Dr. Locke.
It does. The timeline makes it difficult for Locke, but more importantly, they show photos to Georgia Stern.
The witness from the church shooting.
Yeah, the one who said she didn't hear Bosch shout, "Police." She looks at the photos, including Locke's, doesn't ID him, and then Bosch calls Locke directly.
How does Locke reacts?
He completely loses it. Furious, yelling, "What the fuck are you talking about?" into the phone. To Bosch, it sounds absolutely genuine, like someone blindsided who has no idea what's going on.
So Locke's out. The note's legitimacy is shot. Where does Bosch look now?
His attention swings back to the person who knew so much about the note, who wrote the book on the original case, who sounded fascinated by it all. The reporter, Bremer.
He confronts Bremer.
Finds him still hanging around the courthouse, probably sniffing for news on Chandler's disappearance. It gets tense. Really tense. Incredibly, Bremer actually manages to grab Bosch's backup gun off his ankle.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a standoff. And in that moment, Bosch starts laying it all out. All the pieces that are now pointing straight at Bremer.
What were the key clues? What tied Bremer to the killings?
Several things suddenly clicked into place. First, remember those cigarette butts found near where the concrete blonde's body was dumped? Marlboro soft pack.
Bremer's brand.
Bremer's brand. Second, they believe the follower was left-handed. Bremer is left-handed. Third, think about Bremer revealing he knew about Bosch's mother's murder after the trial verdict, showing he had this deep personal information he could use.
But the biggest link was his job, right? His book.
Exactly. That was the key. Bremer covered the original Dollmaker case obsessively, wrote the book. That means he got access. Access to details the task force never made public.
The stuff they held back to catch fakes.
Right. He knew the Dollmaker's specific methods, the program, maybe even things like church shaving his body hair details only someone deep inside would know. That explains how he could have killed victims 7 and 11 before Church was caught, mimicking the signature before anyone else knew it.
And he could keep doing it after his book came out, using the now public details for the later victims, like the concrete blonde.
Makes perfect sense. And then there's the note itself, the one found with Chandler.
It wasn't found with the body initially.
No, it was found later. Tucked inside Honey Chandler's copy of Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Marble Fawn, the book she was reading from during the trial.
And the note contained
a poem, and the final lines, they read, her last word, my gosh, a sound like Bosch.
Wow. So the killer heard Bosch's name, almost certainly at the trial.
Where Bremer was, every day, covering it.
So Bremer confesses.
Faced with all that, yeah, he confesses, admits he's the follower. And his motive, twisted. It was revenge. Revenge on Bosch for killing Norman Church.
Revenge, because Bosch stopped the original Dollmaker.
Yeah. Bremer was angry. Bosch took Church away, ended the spree. Like Bosch ruined his ongoing story, took away his subject. It's messed up.
So he killed more people, mimicking Church because Bosch stopped Church.
That's the disturbed logic. Bremer thinks he's still safe, though. Figures it's just his word against Bosch's, the rogue cop versus the journalist.
But Bosch had an ace up his sleeve.
He reveals he secretly taped the whole conversation. Bremer's confession, the motive, everything. Got him cold.
Wow. So the aftermath? Bremer's arrested. And the first news story about Chandler's murder.
In a final, bizarre twist, it's written by Bremer himself, filed just before the news of his own arrest breaks. Unbelievable.
He's booked.
No bail hold. The investigation digs deeper, finds a storage locker Bremer rented under an alias, Woodward.
And inside?
The final proof, Bremer, like Locke said about sadists, kept trophies, videotapes. He taped everything.
Eggs of the murders.
Tapes confirming Chandler and Magna cum loudly, likely gallery too, and the other missing women Maura mentioned. The sources note, though, he apparently did not tape the first two, victims 7 and 11.
Interesting. Maybe before he fully developed his process.
Or before he realized the full potential for documenting it all. Anyway, with the tapes, the case against him is ironclad.
Does he make a deal?
He does. Looking at life without parole anyway, maybe worse. He agrees to plead guilty, life without parole. In exchange, he agrees to lead police to any other bodies they haven't found, and disturbingly agrees to talk to psychiatrists. For science, let them study him.
It's just wild. The killer was the reporter. Covering the case, talking to Bosch, talking to everyone, hiding right there in plain sight.
It really shows you that tangled relationship, doesn't it, between crime, the police trying to solve it, and the media covering it. Sometimes the line gets incredibly blurred.
Bosch's final thoughts, reflecting on it all. They feel pretty heavy, looking out over the city from his deck.
Yeah, they do. He thinks about the city having this black heart, knowing that catching Bremer, it doesn't end anything, really. There'll always be another killer. And he thinks about Honey Chandler, her fire in the courtroom, and what justice even means after all this.
So looking back at this deep dive through the sources, we went from a courtroom fight over a police shooting back to a cold serial killer case, then slammed into a new, bizarre murder that ended up unmasking the real killer, someone everyone knew.
Yeah, it's a really stark look at how information flows, doesn't it? How it gets controlled or leaked or twisted, how the past just refuses to stay buried, how these dark psychological drives can play out, and how things that seem totally separate a civil trial, missing women from the porn industry, a weird note, can be terrifyingly connected.
And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Building on what we've seen here, Bremer, the killer, he clearly craved attention, right? Through his book, the note, maybe even the spectacle he created.
Definitely seemed driven by that, in part.
And the civil trial itself, certainly from Bosch's viewpoint, it had elements of being a performance, a stage for seeking attention, even while framed as seeking justice. So what does this whole story tell us, maybe, about that weird dance between crime, the media that feeds on it, and our own public fascination with it all? Where does that line between seeking justice or exposing truth and just plain seeking attention, where does it start to blur?